coronavirus has impacted upon the health and lives of millions of people across the world. It has brought out the best in us, people helping people. It has also brought out the worst in us, people hurting and stampeding into grocery stores, hoarding toilet paper, and governments clamping down on our personal liberties. COVID-19 should be respected, but instead of living in fear, we can choose to see this pandemic as an opportunity to give pause and to look around at the injustice and inequality, to wake up and create a new reality, one where we are all equal and we all have a seat at the table. Joining us are the two most prominent voices of this new movement towards a collective consciousness. From Germany, Marianne Ganengieser, and from Australia, Neil Dugan. Thank you, folks. Why do we need to change course?
Why do we need to change course? Because we are heading direct to a wall. And if we don't change our course, we will be smashed, or we will smash ourselves as a society.
Neil?
And it really depends on what you mean by a wall, Mark. So the medical systems around the world which actually support the the creation of this extent of and pandemic and epidemic activity are such that the wall is inevitable to hit unless we actually do something completely different. It will not be possible for us to avoid this wall if we don't do something different.
How do we go about making that change? You're talking about making a major change in the world order, are you not?
Yes. At least I hope so. I hope that people will go for a change.
The change has to be on many levels, Mark. So the teasing, easy thing to think about with this is that we can make small iterative changes and that type of thing, but really we can't go on the way that we are with our sociological systems, with our environmental systems. We can't go on with the hierarchical systems of authority and so on that we've been so used to. And all of these things actually create the environment which ensure that we will have this kind of epidemic and pandemic. So the kind of change that's actually required is large. It's a massive change, but it's inevitable. Without this change, we are facing certain doom. It's not possible for the planet to survive the human experience. So the human experience will not allow Earth as we know it to actually operate.
But you know, a lot of people, and I'm speaking just from an American point of view living here in the States, a lot of people are fat and happy and they don't mind being told what to do by the government, and they surely don't want to change because they've got everything they need. So what do you say to people who are resistant to this, who are fearful of change?
What to say to people who are fearful of change? I think that everybody deep inside is fearful of change because we are afraid of the unknown. But we also can enhance the perspective of going for an adventure to the unknown, which might lead them to some kind of society and living together that is a lot closer to the human mind and to the humankind than greed and money.
Neil?
Well, yeah, as Marianne's sort of touching on, is this selfishness, greed, and fear that actually run the planet at the moment, and the alternatives. An alternative where we do care for other human beings and care for the environment is one where the domination of selfishness, fear, and greed don't exist anymore. And the actual question that you're asking there by saying people are fat and happy. So, you're talking about, the middle class or even the working class are happy with their state as they are. Obviously, the 1% don't really care. They just want more profit and more profit and more power and more power. And what we're looking at for the balance of people is that they want to be asleep. So when you talk about them being fat and happy, what you really mean is that they're comfortable with being asleep. And the only option that's available if there is going to be a shift out of this, absolute car crash that everybody's looking at the moment, is that they wake up. So there's no real alternative to this.
It almost seems to me that when this pandemic finally is under control, that we really cannot afford as a global people to go back to the status quo. The Lakota tribe here in North America has a saying that the hoop of life. And on the hoop of life, there is a place for every human, every plant, and every animal. We're all equal. No one's above us, no one's below us. And that's what it seems that you all are referring to when you're talking about a new vision. Is this correct? People are all equal at the table.
All living beings should be considered equal, and we should not invade other living beings' territory the way we do. From my perspective, the coronavirus pandemic is an answer of life to our misbehavior. And if we look on the symptoms Mother Earth is showing to us, that she can't breathe because there are not enough trees anymore. When we look at the pollution of her tissues, and you look at somebody dying from corona disease, there is a bit of a resemblance in that. So we should a bit look at what life is telling us here.
I've always said that humans are the virus to Mother Earth, and COVID-19 is the vaccine.
Yeah, could be. You could look at it that way.
Neil, what is your perspective?
Well, Mark, what I'm actually thinking of here is that having every voice being heard at the table and every voice being equal at the table doesn't mean that everybody's got the same amount of stuff to talk about, or the same context, or the same information. So, the three of us in this interview, you're interviewing the two of us, and yet the value of each of us is identical. But it doesn't mean that each of us has the same information to share. So we're not expecting everybody to be equal in this vision. This vision is not about everyone being equal at all. That's not remotely what it's about. But it's about everybody being valued. It's about everybody actually being heard. So regardless of what the opinion that they've got, it's important that it can be heard. And one of the things in this the summit that Mariana and I have been very careful about is that we're making sure that we're hearing everybody's voice. It doesn't matter what people's voice is, what they're saying, what their opinions are, what angle they're coming from. It's all of value. Everybody's voice is of value. Now, what we see at the moment with, in the world setting is that we only have the voices of a very, very few that actually are considered to be important. And, so it's the presidents or prime ministers of countries have the loudest voice, and the richest people have the loudest voice, and some other commentators. So in a country like Australia, it's the sports people. The sports people are considered to be an expert, and you're really in trouble when the Australian footy player is being interviewed for what his opinion is about the coronavirus. So this is a real issue that we actually have at the moment, is that how do we measure or how do we assess the actual usefulness, the utility of an opinion at any time? And then, if we're doing that, how do we actually avoid the trap or the pitfall of all these voices being left unheard? Because that's the pitfall that we've got at the moment. So the type of environment that we're heading towards, and to me it's inevitable, this is where we're going, there will be no opportunity for voices to be drowned out. So people that have got a differing but strongly articulated or well-constructed opinion, these voices are very important to hear, regardless of what they're saying. It's all data, it's all information, and it's impossible for us to actually act without to act properly without actually having these voices actually heard.
All right.
That's my take on it.
Okay, but if you have all of these voices joining a chorus, and some are on key and some are off key, are you not creating a cacophony that could lead to anarchy?
What's the problem with anarchy? If you're talking about real anarchy, anarchy in its best sense, or we could call it total democracy, where everybody has a voice and is heard, isn't that what it is all about? We only have to be aware that our freedom ends where the freedom of another person begins. And if we are aware of that and we take distance from violence, I guess anarchy or absolute democracy is the best thing to have.
Neil? What about that?
It's interesting, Mark. Anarchy for English-speaking people is such a powerful word, and it's so negatively construed. And of course, the anarchists that are sort of run into the ground are the anarchists of the the Spanish Civil War at that time of the Civil War, and they were completely written off by the oligarchs, really, by the fascists who were actually running the place. And so we've never really seen what might be possible when everybody's got a voice and everybody's voice is equal. We've never really seen what that's like. We've never seen a world organization where everybody is completely responsible for themselves. We've not witnessed that, but we're heading towards a place where everybody has to become responsible for themselves, for their actions, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, how they're behaving, 100% responsible for themselves. And the inevitable thing that comes from that is that you begin to then actually take care of your environment. And your environment starts with your family. It moves on to other people around you. It then goes out into nature. And this is the inevitable consequence of people really, truly actually taking responsibility for themselves, which is this anarchic principle. I know one of the beautiful interviews that I did and Mariana actually interviewed the same lady, Bilbo, and she was amazing how she talked about her vision for new societies and that type of thing. And it's a talk to look out for in the summit, one that I would highly recommend to people to actually have a look at. And she has a very radical position, and exactly in the light of what we're talking about, her radical position is important. It's really important to have her position being aired and for it to be considered and for it to be valued and for people to actually say, that's interesting. I don't agree with it, or I do agree with it. It matters not whether they agree with it or don't agree with it, but it's that they see it, they respect her for actually having the opinion, they respect the logic and the construction of the argument, and they move forward. Like this is the juice, this is what can really make things work in an extremely interesting and exciting way.
I want to go back, though, that you said that it comes down to personal responsibility. How do you, in America, we consider corporations people. What do you say to the CEO of the fossil fuel industry, whose job it is to extract oil from the earth, pollute the land, and make a lot of money? How do they become responsible?
There would be a real good possibility to get responsible in closing the company and take consequence and action of what you see and consider as ethical. There is no change without change, Mark.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, I'm not. I agree. But it's radical stuff you're talking about. Almost,
yeah.
You're going to a paradigm shift in the way people think. Now, as a left-handed person, I'm a right side brain type.
Okay.
So I'm familiar with emotions and whatnot. But much of the corporate world that I see in America is the other side. They're, as Bilbo said in her interview, the counters. So if I'm already there, you guys are talking about hippie stuff. You're talking about new age kind of theories. How do you get that through to people who are on the other side of the brain?
I don't think that it is about hippie stuff. That is already done. We had that phase in society. We can either open the eyes and see going down the track we are heading for is just polluting and exploiting, and in the last case, killing the planet. And we are living on that planet. There is no other planet to go to once we have finished this one. So either we close the eyes and say we are not responsible, we just take what we can, or we see that we are responsible, we want to be responsible, we want to integrate and go back to a homeostasis with Earth, and that means change. Change that might be uncomfortable, but that might be able to reintegrate with Earth, and as a society and mankind, live another thousands of years on this planet. And that's the choice.
I think that the question that you're asking there about is it a hippie standpoint that we're working from here? It's well worth having a look at, Mark. So that movement was about throwing things out. It was about throwing out control. It was about so-called freedom, but it was not really about becoming self-responsible. So the movement was about discarding controls. It wasn't about taking an internal place of responsibility. I don't want to use the word, control inside yourself, because it's not really about that or that energy, nor is it possible to work on the basis of committing violence against yourself and to control yourself. But it's definitely not that energy of laziness and ineffectuality. It's definitely not that aspect of the selfishness. When you become completely self-responsible in the way that we're talking about, then it matters to you whether there's good air, whether there's 5G polluting the the electromagnetic spectrum, whether there's this stuff matters. It really actually matters to you, and so therefore you actually are going to you're going to take action, as Mariana's talking about. Clearly, if you're completely self-responsible, then you realize the impact of yourself on another person. And so therefore you would never be violent. It requires complete non-violence for this to operate as well. So there's many, many aspects that make the comparison to the hippie era, there's many, many ways in which it's unnecessary to actually draw that parallel. But it's really interesting that in the three of us, our lifetimes, there's been a period of society where a big number of people actually opted into a system which was quite different to the mainstream. So it was an alternate, course of action that was being taken there by a lot of people outside of the mainstream. And so we know that it's possible for large groups of people to make a choice, and to make a choice in a different direction. What's coming out of this summit and all of the interviews, and it's incredible how consistent the message is that keeps coming out of the mouths of people that we're interviewing, is that we have to have change, and the change has to be towards self-responsibility. And we hear that, Mariana, you'll back me up, we hear this over and over again in the interviews. And that's without us prompting anything, Mark. It's very consistently observed.
Kind of change that you're talking about, dramatic change, a quantum leap, seems to me that in order for someone to be open to make a change, you have had to suffer through something in your life, perhaps a trauma, or where you had to take responsibility for yourself, where you could no longer live the way you were. Is that fair to say?
Yes, definitely. If I think about my own life, I'm trained as an animal doctor, and I got a heart attack when I was 35. And I had to rethink my life, whether I want to go on like that or dig deeper into my real purpose of life. And 1 year later, I closed my office and went down a total different track of life. And I'm a lot happier since. You know, I can be a vet, but I'm not meant to be a vet. It was just an idea of mine because I like animals.
Neil, in your clinical work, you work with clients who've had trauma. Was that a fair comment that I made?
Look, absolutely. And the emerging reality that I see is that the trauma has built up to such an extent in people that almost everyone that you talk to is at some kind of breaking point. And so we've got streets full of people, you know, walking up and down who are ready to snap. You know, they're ready to snap in one direction or another. And when I talk to colleagues around the world, they're all saying the same thing, is that people are at a critical point with what's going on. And obviously with this coronavirus, it's just escalated. That process is escalating completely. And one of the hypotheses that Marianne and I talk about from time to time is that it's the pollution profile that is the main stressor that we're looking at. So we have all the chemical stressors, we have the electromagnetic frequency stressors, we have the stressors of media, so the way in which the media actually is pummeling people in the advertising world, and all of these demands. So like these are stressors that are coming in, you know, fast and furious into people's psyches. And whenever I'm meeting new clients, it's obvious that they're at the point where they're ready to break if they haven't already broken. It's everywhere. And so when we talk about trauma, like ordinarily you'd be thinking, oh, it was some, you know, terrible single event or a number of events that were related to each other. I agree, there's plenty of that out there in the community, and that will be a trigger for people to make change. But what we're seeing is the slow creeping stressor, which is the pollution profile, the actual pollution profile that people are experiencing, and it's across the board. And that is leading to a place where people are, you know, so on the edge that they are, you know, there's a definite trend that people are beginning to talk about. We have to change. And you know, Marianne, you can talk about the German language interviews that you've done, which I can't understand because I don't understand German. But certainly in all the English language ones that I've done, people are saying this over and over again, that we are under stress. Humans are really in trouble. And the planet's in trouble, obviously, when we're talking to environmentalists like yourself, Mike. But it's a common story, is that we're at the point where the stress is so high that change is going to come. Change will come.
Okay, I have a million questions, but I want to make sure I get this stuff in here to help you with the summit. So the question is, when folks watch these interviews, what do you hope they can garner from them to help them set a course for change?
We had interviews with a lot of people who have first aid methods. From how to do your own food in your garden to how to get resilient within 3 minutes. We are going for a lot of first aid methods that can be transported into life within an instant. And the other hand is to give information on other opinions so that you don't depend on mass media. And if you hear interviews from all over the world, and you hear people from India, from Canada, from the UK, from Greece, and you see, oh, the people there think that, the people there think that, you're not so dependent on opinions that might manipulate you.
Yeah. Look, I completely agree with what Marianne is saying there. One of the really important things is that the information that comes to people, in other words, the weighting that is given, is completely manipulated. And you know, in your professional career, you know, Mark, you will have seen this over and over again. And the opportunities to actually hear from the horse's mouth, so you know, from some real experts in these fields, which, as Mariana says, have immediate practical opportunities for people. So like they watch and listen to these things immediately they can begin to apply them. For me personally, aside from that being extremely useful with this practical stuff, for me, it's being able to open. So the outcome for people when they see all these diverse opinions and hear the way that people are processing, is that the opportunity for them to actually open themselves, realize that they don't have to hold on to a redundant truth because their parents or the politicians or the church leaders or whoever else, whatever it is that dominant information, they can begin to see it as just being more information. But here's some other stuff. And hang on a minute, how do I feel? What's my own truth? And how can I actually go forward from there? So to me, this is the really crux point that comes out of all of these interviews, is that it's presenting an opportunity for people to begin to think for themselves. And they will learn, it will help them. It will help them to do that.
What's the genesis of the coronavirus summit? How did this whole idea come up between the two?
The idea was that a lot of my clients went into trouble. And as I can't travel anymore, I'm situated in Greece now. They only can talk to me. And they came back and say, is this true? What do I have to think? Is it dangerous to me? And I just asked Neil and said, we have to do something on a bigger scale to answer questions. And to give a bit of guide to those who lost orientation totally.
It's an interesting thing. There's a difference between actually providing alternate viewpoints, which can then be utilized by a person as new data, new information, so that they can self-guide themselves forward, and the traditional approach, which is we are being manipulated. And so when Mariana, contacted me about it, and she'd just recently finished an online congress, and she was looking forward to having a bit of a holiday. And I said, well, you probably need to sort of forget the idea of having a holiday, because we're going to start a congress based on this. And the German-speaking congress has been running for, what, 2-3 weeks now, Marianne, something like that?
4 weeks.
4 weeks. And so we were started right at the very, very beginning. And it's proven to be extremely helpful, for those people who are able to get on there and understand German. It's been really useful.
What do you hope to achieve?
Yes, I said that we are tormenting them with English videos too.
Bilingual?
Not bilingual. We make them understand English language.
What do you hope to accomplish? The end result obviously would be to bring about the change. But what do you hope people get from being part of this summit?
What I personally hope, this is me personally, I hope that we get into more interdisciplinary talks, that we realize that we can solve any topic as long as we do the same as some other countries do. Just join a few experts on a round table and let them talk. The problem is that we don't talk with each other about the problems. We try to solve them on our own, in a family, on a medical scale, on a political scale. We just try to find the solution on our own. But if we could join a musician, someone from politics, a lawyer, a scientist, and maybe just an ordinary person, we might find a solution to a topic within 2 hours. We just don't do it. And my hope is that we get back to interdisciplinary talks.
Neil?
Oh, my hope, Mark, running forward, is that people realize that they do have the power to change, so that they don't have to be locked in a mindset which is generational, so that it came from our parents and grandparents and so on. So my hope is that people actually recognize that they have the right to choose what their own truth is. So this would be what I would really hope comes out of it as a minimum outcome. And obviously there's a much bigger agenda there as well, which is for people to wake up. So I'm on record on this topic, which is that I believe that it's the hierarchical structures which lead to a victim and bully duality. That is the fundamental issue that we need to move away from. So my personal agenda is to make sure that as many people are aware of how destructive it is to be locked in a victim and bully duality. Just how it destroys you, how it destroys the victim, how it destroys the bully. I want people to understand that inside of every victim there is a bully, and inside of every bully there's a victim. So I'm hoping that people are going to actually recognize that and see that there's a way out of that. And the jump is to jump away from hierarchy. The way is to jump towards self-responsibility. This is my hope.
And when people watch these interviews and participate in it, is there a way from them then to join this movement to create a mass gathering of people around the world?
At the moment, we are not allowed gatherings, as you know, all over the planet. We are forbidden to do that. But we can gather online. And what we want to do is to go from the summit to, within 4 weeks, add some kind of newspaper, online newspaper, and then add a platform, a forum where people can go into discussion and into teams and solve problems if they want to do so.
Yeah, so the movement is, inherent to the opportunity mark. So the movement actually flows naturally from it, and it's a movement of self-responsibility. If we've got 10 people, and 10 people are all deciding to be self-responsible, and that means actually then that they need to connect out to their environment. What are they going to do? That's what they're going to do. They're going to choose to do it. So it begins. We take the steps, and then we will work as hard as we possibly can to make sure that the structure is in place to actually support it. And we're very, very, very close. So like we're launching the English language, 4 weeks. Gosh, those 4 weeks have gone quick, Mariana. And so we're launching it in English 4 weeks later because we wanted to get a lot of these technical things straightened out so that we're actually in a place where we can hold a conversation. The conversation is possible. We can actually support it.
My observation is that, yes, as society, we tend to speak too much, especially here in the States. You'll hear pundits just go on and on and on, and if they're talking to somebody next to them who has a different point of view, they will shout over them. There's no conversation. Mm-hmm. It seems to me you're asking us to listen, to open our eyes and listen, not only to the conversation of our fellow human, but listen to the conversation of the animals, of the plants, of the natural world. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I lately talked to a viper, and I learned a lot from that viper. I learned a lot about taking territory.
What did the viper say?
The viper said the territory is something that belongs not only to place, but to time and place. And that territories are floating things. And if we are aware about the time and place of territory of other beings, we don't get into conflicts. We just have to have the awareness. And so the viper told me that she is looking for cats when cats are going over the place and chasing mice, and she won't go the same time, the same place, because that would be her death.
I listen to and talk with all kinds of beings, Mark. It's not an issue for me either. And, I believe that everybody can do this. And we have several speakers or interviewees who will be running workshops on just how to actually develop the intuition. So Jack McIntyre is one of them. She's going to be providing on the workshops on a Saturday where she's going to be leading people through how to become really solid in that intuitive process. Now, the intuitive process is the beginning of being able to observe your environment, to be able to hear and to converse. with your environment, and that includes everything from the microbes up. And indeed, you can get a sense of what the Earth is doing, what's going on with the seasons, what's happening with the climate. All of these things can actually be done once you start. All it takes is a first step. You just have to take some first steps and, go on from there. So, people who are watching this interview, I would urge them to follow on and do that workshop with Jack. And there'll be plenty else as well. Like I've got plenty of things planned myself, and I know Mariana has, and many of other interviewees or experts, as they kindly describe people like us in the German context, as English speakers who always struggle with the idea of being an expert. But there's plenty of opportunity for people to learn through this group, through this community, how to actually hear. So I have conversations with microbes, so bacteria, parasites, funguses,
sharks.
Yeah. So Mark remembers years ago, I told him about talking to my friend, the shark.
Togo.
Togo. And it was actually Mark that gave me the name Togo for it.
Yeah, that was Togo, the dog that was owned by the musher who brought the polio vaccine to the Native Americans, the indigenous. As you speak, it reminds me of the Yupik and the Inuit people of Alaska and the Bering Sea, and that they listen to the earth, they understand the rhythms of the earth, they understand everything about what the seals and the whales are saying. So my question to you, are you two old souls?
Maybe. At least we have been quite a bit of time on that planet.
I think so, Mike, but it's not necessary for somebody to be here as an old soul, as you describe it, for you to be able to actually talk to the animals and the plants. So I know clients and other colleagues, in fact, who I'm sure they're aliens, because they're just so different. And but they're wonderful, beautiful, imaginative, creative people, and they have special skills in being able to hold these conversations. It's almost as though they can jump the hurdles quicker and easier than so-called old souls.
Of course, from my experience, it's as simple as turning the television off, going out into nature, close your eyes and listen to the sounds of nature, the wind, the water, the birds. They're communicating to you. The more you do that, the closer you'll get to understanding what's being said to you. For meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Just another way for me to try to advance change within myself. Is there anything that really you haven't said in your interviews that you really want to get across, Marianne?
Oh, now that you mention it, I did throw out the TV 30 years ago to be able to listen to the sounds of life and the sounds of nature and to focus on that. I stopped reading books in 1989 after speaking to an Indian guru who said, if I don't skip reading books, there will be nothing good coming from me anymore. And still, I think I'm not uneducated. I think I know more than if I still would watch TV and read books. It's just another kind of knowledge that comes if you skip that outward information flow. There's a lot of inner information coming through, and that is much more worthwhile.
So this, Mariana, again, she's leading me perfectly on here, because what we're talking about with this getting the information that's coming through, so we can call it intuition, that we go out, as you talk about it, Mark, you go out into nature and you feel the wind and you hear the trees and so on. And very, very soon you begin to actually start hearing the real messages that are available. And you hear the plaintive pleas from the microbes in the soil. And when this coronavirus epidemic, the epidemic of fear, as it was really biting and it was really kicking in, I remember going outside and actually hearing the suffering of the trees around me from all of the psychic energy from the humans. So all of that fear and the anger and the anxiety and all of that was going on, the trees were feeling it. The birds were. It's actually the birds that talked to me about it first, and then the trees said to me, if you think that's bad, see what's happening to the fungus that are living in the soil around the roots of the trees. And they are absolutely in a desperate state from it. So the impact of this sort of global, pandemic of fear is something which is really significant. It's much more significant than is being giving any kind of, voice. Generally speaking, it's just not talked about. So it's all possible. We can all learn, by switching off the TV, as you said, Mark, and Mariana did it 30 years ago. I got rid of my TV about 6 years ago, and it's start listening.
In my opinion, the greatest weapon against fear is hope. And what you're offering us is to get more in tune with our own self-responsibility and create a new paradigm, a new world where everything is equal, where we're not degrading the planet. It seems to me that that's a very hopeful message you're sharing.
That's the world I want to live in.
And it comes from trust. It comes from a place of trust. So, we trust in ourselves. When we're self-responsible, we trust in ourselves to actually be able to determine what our own truth is. Complete trust in ourselves. We listen to our environment and we trust our perception. We trust our ability to actually interpret the information that's coming in. And coming out of that inevitably will be hope. It's positive. It's go forward. It's uplifting. Absolutely inevitable.
And all adventures start with the first step. This is the first step of people participating in this and beginning to process what's been said, listening and processing.
Oh, that's one view of it. And another view is that it's long been going. So, where we stand at the moment, we're actually already on the crest of the wave. So the calamity that's sitting around us at the moment this is the breaking wave. It's happening. It's happening right now.
I find it all extremely fascinating. Everything that you all say, it's challenging. I think it will be challenging to some people who will come into this with a closed mind, but when they begin to listen, it is so exhilarating, and it really challenges us to rethink our whole idea of what this world is then. And it's coming at a global time that I find fascinating, because here in America, I always thought we were the only ones who had a government like our government. We wrap ourselves in an American flag and say we're so pro-democracy, yet we're not. But this is happening around the world, and I find that fascinating. And it seems to be an organic grassroots movement that's spreading. And you guys are just elevating it further and broadcasting, sharing it with those of us who need to hear this message. So I thank you for that personally. And I do hope that anybody who watches these interviews will really listen to them. And you don't necessarily have to agree, but listen to what's being said. And then quietly, after you watch, quietly go some space, either in your own mind or in some physical place, and think. Think that you have the power to change. You have the power to create this world where there is equality and justice for all. Thank you all very much. And Neil, so much thanks to you. And Marianne, so much thanks to you too. Congratulations for this wonderful summit, and all the very best.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you from my heart.
Yeah.